A new report from Washington think tank CSIS Center for Strategic and International Studies have exposed a long-hidden secret. Near the China-North Korea border, in North Pyongan province, Simpodon lies a massive undisclosed missile base, never before revealed to the outside world. Satellite imagery shows the site is armed with 6 to 9 intercontinental ballistic missiles, potentially the Hwasong-15, Hwasong-18, or even newer variants, all capable of carrying nuclear warheads. The base is more than a launch site. It houses mobile missile launches, fortified underground facilities dug deep into the mountains, and hardened drive-through missile checkout facilities. Together, they form a complete and survivable command center, designed to deliver a nuclear strike at any moment. U.S. military experts warn this threat extends far beyond South Korea and Japan, with ranges exceeding 10,000 kilometers, 6,000 miles. These missiles put America's west coast and even Washington, New York, and Chicago well within striking distance. Even more alarming, the base is located just 27 kilometers, 17 miles from the Chinese border. It is one of an estimated 15 to 20 undeclared North Korean missile facilities used for operations, maintenance, support, and storage of warheads. Analysts note that this site has never been part of any U.S.-North Korea denuclearization talks. The discovery raises a chilling question. Is this Kim Jong-un's nuclear brinkmanship, or is Beijing quietly allowing or even guiding this operation behind the scenes? Chapter 1: A Nuclear Shadow That Looms Over More Than Just America. The Sinpundon base spans a 13-mile perimeter, roughly a 5-kilometer square compound. Analysts believe it houses at least a brigade-level missile unit, heavily armed and on constant standby. Yet details remain scarce. No reliable information confirms the exact structure or size of the missile force stationed there. However, after reviewing satellite imagery dating back to 2003 alongside interviews, open-source intelligence, and known patterns of North Korean military activity, the preliminary assessment suggests that the base likely hosts a brigade-sized formation. That would mean 3 missile battalions fielding 6 to 9 Hwasong-15 or Hwasong-18 ICBM launch systems, supported by additional auxiliary forces. CSIS warns that in a crisis, missiles could be moved out of Simpundon, linked with special forces, and launched from dispersed sites across North Korea, making detection and interception far more difficult. The report stresses that Simpundon, along with other hidden facilities, represents a critical pillar of North Korea's expanding nuclear deterrence and striking capabilities. Construction on the Simpundon missile base began around 2004, with the facility largely completed and operational by 2014. Like other sites within North Korea's strategic missile belt, it is believed to have been built by specialized engineering units under the Korean People's Army Military Construction Bureau. Over the years, media reports cited a missile base in locations such as Chansonggan, Paigandong, Paigantong, Paikundong, Saekjugan, which borders Taiguan-gup, Saekju-up, Taiguan-gun, or Taiguan-up, are most likely referring to the Sinpundon base. Now, some may ask, isn't this America's problem? What does it have to do with China? The answer is everything. This base lies just 27 kilometers, 70 miles from the Chinese border. In the past, Beijing may have been willing to turn a blind eye to North Korea's underground nuclear test. But now, Kim Jong-un has positioned intercontinental missiles virtually on China's doorstep. Can Beijing really claim it didn't know? And more importantly, China is not just a bystander. Consider this: where did North Korea get the rocket propellant, mobile launch vehicle, radar tracking, and ballistic guidance systems needed for ICBMs? North Korea doesn't have the industrial base or satellite navigation networks to develop these on its own. The answer, analysts argue, comes down to 2 words from Beijing, not reluctantly, but through covert support. Behind this lies an even more dangerous calculation. By enabling North Korea's ICBM program, Beijing gains a tool to tie down US forces in the Asia-Pacific, forcing Washington to split its focus between the Taiwan Strait and the Korean Peninsula. On paper, it looks like a clever strategy. In truth, it's a classic case of nurturing a threat that could eventually strike back. Kim Jong-un's decision to position ICBMs right next to the Chinese border signals something profound. He does not fear Beijing. He is no longer a mere pawn. He can turn on China at any moment. If the situation spirals out of control, Kim's missiles won't just threaten the US, South Korea, or Japan. Beijing and China's northeast could also be in the firing line. That leaves the Chinese Communist Party in an awkward position. On the world stage, it must project an image of supporting denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. Yet, behind the scenes, it relies on Kim Jong-un's nuclear arsenal as a ticking time bomb to threaten Washington. And that's why, when the CSIS report surfaced, American commentators almost unanimously pointed the finger at Beijing, warning that the Simpundong missile base is not an isolated North Korean action. It's part of a joint nuclear blackmail strategy between Pyongyang and Beijing. North Korea's missiles are no longer the obsession of one reckless dictator. They have become a hidden piece on Beijing's strategic chessboard, a piece that could at any moment break free, spin out of control, and turn into a nuclear time bomb threatening everyone. Chapter 2: Beijing's Double Game. In the nuclear chess game on the Korean Peninsula, Beijing has lost control. What it once saw as a referee's seat, remote firmly in hand, has become a target. Now, it finds itself being led by the nose. Let's break down Beijing's nuclear calculation. From the outset, China has been one of the key architects of this situation. Publicly, it champions denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula and presents itself as a mediator at the United Nations. But when Kim Jong-un constructs massive missile bases or carries out test launches, Beijing never truly objects. Take the Simpundong base, a vast complex just across the border. Are we to believe China's intelligence services didn't know? Impossible. Not only did they know, they allowed it, even turning a blind eye. Analysts believe this aligns with a broader strategic calculation. By allowing North Korea to advance its missiles capabilities, Beijing creates a regional distraction that can divert US attention and resources away from the Taiwan Strait. On the international stage, China positions itself as both a mediator and a stakeholder. Domestically, China's state media pushes the narrative. See, America isn't only targeting us, it's also targeting North Korea. We're in the same trench. But here's the miscalculation. Beijing thinks it's in control. Kim Jong-un does not. Why else would Kim move an ICBM base right next to China's doorstep? His message is clear. Attack Simpundong and you'll hit China too. This nuclear shield lets him demand money, oil, and concessions from Beijing. And if China refuses, he can simply trigger another nuclear crisis. And what if the US decides to strike? A raid on Simpundong would risk collateral damage spilling into China's northeast, Dandong, Shenyang, Jilin, all within reach of US's F-22 and B-2 stealth bombers, missiles, or drones. Once the shooting starts, no one can guarantee the fight won't cross the border. Beijing's so-called nuclear linkage strategy is increasingly becoming a liability, one that risks pulling China into conflict. The original calculation appeared to be that if tensions rose over Taiwan, North Korea could be used to stir regional instability and stretch US forces thin. However, Kim Jong-un seems to operate by a different logic. If you move, I don't. If I move, you must. And if you stay silent, I'll light the fuse. In other words, Kim has trapped Beijing in a nuclear volcano, turning the very strategy meant to shield China into its greatest vulnerability. Kim's ambitions go well beyond playing China's sidekick. He has no intention of remaining the little brother. He wants a seat at the superpower table, playing his own game directly against the United States. For him, Beijing is not the master. It's just a convenient excuse, a shield he can hide behind until he no longer needs it. The United States sees this clearly. That's why the CSIS report didn't just highlight Simpundong for its missiles. It spotlighted the emerging China-North Korea nuclear axis. Washington is signaling to the world, these are not separate threats. They are one problem, linked together. That meant future US actions, whether it's sanctions, military drills, or strategic containment, won't be aimed only at Pyongyang. They will hit Beijing directly. What China hoped would be a pawn to distract firepower has turned into a weapon pointed back at its own face. This is no longer a strategy, it's a miscalculation. If Beijing now wants to distance itself, it's too late. Their paths have already converged. Shift the blame? Unlikely. Kim holds the leverage. Maintain control? Then Beijing must be prepared to follow him straight into the abyss. The Simpundong missile base isn't just a problem for Washington. It could mark the beginning of Beijing's nightmare. Chapter 3. The US sets the trap and Beijing is forced to the table. The exposure of the Simpundong missile base is no accident. It is a strategic card deliberately played by Washington. This was not just a revelation, it was a setup, a public naming and shaming designed as a prelude to conflict. The satellite image cited by the CSIS were not new. The real question is, why release them now, on August 20th, through Bloomberg? The answer, this was not a leak. It was a carefully timed opening move for an information war. The message is clear. The US has changed the script. For decades, Washington framed the issue narrowly as denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, keeping the problem confined to Pyongyang. But this time, CSIS placed the spotlight directly on the China-North Korea border, making it plain this base cannot be explained without Beijing. By doing so, Washington dragged China from the shadows into the spotlight, seating it at the same nuclear blackmail table as Kim Jong-un. No more hiding, no more deniability. This shift reframes the entire narrative. It's no longer merely about the Kim's family recklessness, it now implicates China's complicity. What began as a tactical dispute has escalated into a full-fledged geopolitical confrontation, and that escalation may prove to be the most consequential move of all. Because the real battlefield isn't inside North Korea, it's the global struggle over narrative control. Washington has now armed itself with a shield of legitimacy. Sanctions? It warned of the China-North Korea axis. Military containment? It pointed to a missile base on China's doorstep. Allied coordination, it argued that Beijing cannot evade responsibility. In other words, America has preemptively stripped away its own moral constraints and placed a target squarely on Xi Jinping. Beijing wanted to hide behind Pyongyang's shadows. Instead, Washington has cut the kite strings and held up China's hand on the controls for the world to see. And the most critical point, this move is not just about North Korea. It is about a dual-front strategy. On one front, direct pressure in the Taiwan Strait through diplomacy, military drills, and technological blockades. On the other, pressure through North Korea, where the threat of a border nuclear crisis hangs over Beijing like a sword. The brilliance and the cruelty of the strategy is simple. Washington doesn't have to attack Beijing. It only has to make Beijing live in constant fear that Kim Jong-un could drag it into war. If a Taiwan crisis erupts, Washington only needs to push lightly and Simpundong will return to the headlines. At the UN, at the G7, across every global media outlet. The question will be the same. Will China take responsibility for this nuclear base? At that moment, Beijing will be caught at the crossing of two spears, with no way forward and no way back. So when Washington expressed shock over Simpundong, it is nothing more than strategic theater. The truth is, this was pre-planned, a precisely detonated information bomb. The real shock is in Beijing, staring at the realization that its little brother has become a mirror, reflecting all of China's nuclear schemes back to the world. Beijing thought it could play the game with hidden pieces. Instead, its pawn flipped the board. It thought North Korea could absorb risk on its behalf. Instead, North Korea became the risk itself. The Simpundong base may look like a North Korean problem. In reality, its exposure amounts to a global trial of Beijing's nuclear betrayal. This is not a crisis created by Kim Jong-un. It is a nuclear trap China built for itself. The question now is no longer whether Beijing can distance itself from Pyongyang. The world is asking something far more direct. Will Beijing dare to continue this game? Now let's take another look at the full board. The missile operating base is situated within an isolated narrow mountain valley that runs generally southwest to northeast on the southern slopes of Pugo Mountain, divided by a small stream. Covering roughly 22 square kilometers, satellite imagery analyzed by the CSIS shows 6 distinct functional zones: entrance, checkpoints, headquarters, and administration with barracks, civilian housing, and vehicle maintenance, warehouse areas, hardened drive-through missile checkout facilities, sometimes referred to as missile support facilities, large underground facility, and a variety of dispersed small housing and support buildings. The entrances and checkpoints are positioned on the southwestern perimeter. Beyond that, at least 7 separate compounds dot the surrounding area, each with small cultivated fields. Every drive-through missile checkout facility consists of a large concrete reinforced shelter cut directly into the mountainside, measuring about 35 by 17 meters, buried under earth and rock, their rooftops camouflaged with vegetation. The entrances are wide enough to accommodate all known Korean People's Army, KPA Transporter Erector Launchers, TELs, Mobile Erector Launchers, MELs, Transporter Erectors, TEs, as well as support vehicles and equipment. Just like at other missile bases, trees and shrubs are planted at the entrances for concealment. But the underground facilities are what make Simpundon different. Unlike other missile sites, here the underground facility is built 20 to 40 meters above the flood-prone streams. Massive ramps, likely constructed with rocks and gravel excavated from the tunnels, led to the 2 entrances, with water channels built underneath to let the stream flow through. Each entrance is about 5.5 meters wide, large enough to admit all launches and support vehicles. Unlike other bases, there are no large rocks and soil protective berms to help protect them from attack. This is not just another North Korean missile base. It is a calculated, precision-placed nuclear deployment. U.S. assessment indicate that Simpundon hosts brigade-level forces armed with intercontinental ballistic missiles and a complete launch infrastructure with strike range reaching directly into the U.S. mainland. And its location just steps away from the Chinese border. This is no rogue gambled by Pyongyang. It's a deployment that could only exist with Beijing's tacit approval, if not active encouragement. Beijing thought it could play a double game, posing as the peacemaker in public, while letting its little brother stir the waters behind the scenes. But the reality has boomeranged back. Kim Jong-un is no longer following orders. Instead, he has planted a nuclear card right in China's own backyard. Now Beijing itself is the hostage of this nuclear gamble. If tensions spike, China's northeast will be on the front line. If Pyongyang turns, Beijing will be forced to foot the bill, provide cover, and pay the price. What was supposed to be a clever strategic placement has instead become a nuclear tripwire buried under China's own doorstep. And Washington has dropped the mask. This is no longer framed as a North Korea problem. The world now sees it as what it really is: a systemic threat of China-North Korea joint nuclear blackmail. Once again, the risks are clear. The US is coerced into a two-front response. China is trapped in a deadlock of its own making, and the rest of the world is dragged into dealing with an uncontrollable nuclear wildcard. Simpun has become the symbol of that backlash. It's not just a tactical asset, it's a nuclear warning pressed directly against China's face. The report ends with a piercing question. When missiles are already aimed at China's own border, and the nuclear shadow has crept to Beijing's very doorstep, does the regime still dare to gamble? Or has this so-called proxy gamble already collapsed into a desperate dead end? A game of checkmate? The next move will not only determine North Korea's path, it will shape the fate of the Chinese Communist Party itself.